Yep. Okay, cool. All right. So, I guess we'll start with just what music production is. And I guess it's the process of creating, processing, and mixing sounds to make a piece of music. So you could be something just recording, singing. It could be recording for radio. It could be the background music you hear in movies and ads, and all that stuff goes through the same process, which is just mixing sounds together, making sure they sound good and balanced, and but also that creative part of it, which is like, creating melodies and rhythm and all that, and songwriting. So pretty much all you need to do it this day and age is these things here on the screen. First, you need a computer, and it doesn't really matter if you have a Mac or a PC. I've used both, and pretty much PCs are much cheaper. You get a lot more for your dollar, but you do need some resilience when it comes to like solving problems and driver issues and things like that. Like but it is way cheaper, and you can get, not that I'm condoning it, but you can get like software much easier than Macs. But Macs just work, and you don't really have many problems. And the other thing is latency. Macs have much better latency. So if you're playing live instruments, like with a keyboard like this, like down here, don't want that. There's a keyboard here. Yep. And that's much better on a Mac, because there's less latency through the system. And these are kind of the minimum specs you'd probably want for doing music production. 16 gig RAM, 6 core, and 1 terabyte SSD. You can get away with a little bit less maybe, but that's sort of what I'd recommend. Also, I think someone's audio on. I can hear some sounds. There we go. That's good. And then secondly, you need a digital audio workstation, which is just the program which you use to record and mix and stuff. So I use Ableton mostly. I've used, there's Logic, which is only specific to Mac, which is sort of like a better GarageBand. GarageBand, you can use that too, but it's quite limited. I'd recommend going to Logic as soon as possible if you're on that. Other ones are like FL Studio or Pro Tools. They all pretty much do the same thing. Ableton kind of does have a few. It's good for live performance, and it's really good at like sort of warping audio and stuff. I just like it. Logic is got great like stock sounds, and is great for recording and electronic music as well. FL Studio is better for electronic music. It's not the easiest to do recording with, but it's kind of like different to all the others. It's more creative. I feel like it's more like an instrument. A close friend of mine uses that, and it's like it's easier to be creative with it because it's sort of like more of a canvas, and you just throw sounds on. And Pro Tools is better for just doing recording audio. So that's like what you find in most recording studios is Pro Tools. But I like Ableton. They're all different price points too. FL Studio is super cheap. Pro Tools is quite expensive. Logic is not too bad, and Ableton's reasonably expensive. Thirdly, you need some headphones or speakers. Probably I'd go headphones first because they're more versatile. And speakers, you kind of need a good room as well. Like this, I've set up like a room with foam and stuff on the walls, and then so I'd recommend just some like maybe biodynamic headphones, 770s, which is similar to what I have. And then speakers, if you do go down that route, you go Yamaha HS5s or 7s, or I think there's another one's called Rocket. And they're, yeah, but I would first go just headphones, because then you can record and stuff like that. Fourthly, you need an audio interface. So that is something that processes the audio. Like your computer has an audio interface in it, a sound card, so to speak, but it's not very good. It doesn't, it's not high fidelity audio, and it doesn't, you also use the audio interface to convert signals from a microphone or a guitar into the digital domain, like recording it, and then you also need to convert it back. So that's pretty much what you need to know. It's like a little interface. It looks like this. This is the Steinberg one, which I recommend if you're on a budget. Otherwise, I'd go like anything by RME or UAD, but they're like several $1,000s. And I like the Steinberg ones because they have inbuilt effects. So if you're recording singing or guitar, you can have you can hear reverb in your headphones, which I think is nice. Otherwise, it's just dry and doesn't sound that good. I just want to double check I'm recording stuff. Yeah. So then if you want to record some either guitar or vocals, you need a microphone. Typically the most common ones are condenser and dynamic microphones. Dynamic microphones are mostly used for live, and they're normally very unidirectional, so they don't bring in a lot of sound from outside. That's why it's good for the live space. And condenser microphones are more sensitive, and you can get it's sort of high quality audio mostly. So I mean, the one dynamic microphone I could recommend for the studio is the Shure SMB. They're fairly cheap. It's like what Michael Jackson used on the Thriller album, I think, and they're like $600 or something. But otherwise, condensers, sort of you get what you pay for up to a certain point. There's ridiculously expensive microphones, like $20,000, but this one's quite good. This was $2,000, but I mean, you don't need to start with that. That's kind of like what I've progressed to, and I'm happy with at the moment. And then lastly, there's third-party plugins, which plugins are little bits of software that run inside the DAW, used to process the audio, and all the DAWs, the like Ableton, Logic, and that have inbuilt stock standard plugins, and some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. Like I was saying, Logic has really good stock plugins. Ableton ones are alright. But if you really want to kind of get to the next level in terms of quality, you need to start investing in other third-party plugins. And that also goes back to PC, because there's, it's easier to get plugins on PC. Any questions so far? Probably lost people.
Yeah, sorry, I don't really understand what plugins are.
Plugin is like this. Like if I, do you know what an EQ is? Or reverb? Reverb is, hang on a second. I'm just going to change this. Yeah. Resume share. Sorry, Zoom is, I'm trying to record a portion of my screen and then it doesn't let me click stuff. It's kind of annoying. So I'm going to have to share my whole desktop. Hopefully that's right. There we go. But now you're going to see all sorts of stuff. But yeah, cool. So yeah, a plugin is like reverb, for example. So you can get a reverb and put it on a track. That's a reverb. So if I had like some guitar, like maybe I recorded some guitar, that's me. That's the piece of audio from the guitar. And if I press play, that's without the plugin. And I can bring up the mix. Yeah, so you can be reverb, it can be EQ, compression, but I'll go into that in a second. Yeah. And all right, so next, I guess we go to the very basic level. We'll just start from the very beginning, which is what's sound. Sound is just a vibration, and it's a combination of what you call like sine waves, which is literally pure sound of one thing vibrating at a certain number of times a second. This is getting pretty nerdy, but I don't know. I just think that's, I don't know. It's relevant, but like, so an A string on a guitar vibrates at 440 times a second. So I think there might be. This is like an EQ, but it's showing down here is the lowest frequencies a human can hear. Up here is the highest frequency a human can hear. That's all you need to know for the moment. And this is a synthesizer, which is making a pure sine wave, that's why you just get one frequency on this. So that's equivalent to so that's if I went down to like so slow. My computer's struggling because I'm doing this recording at the same time. So like if I go to 440 hertz, that's like an A. So it says A, 440 hertz, and that's going to be here. So that's pretty much, so sound is just a vibration, and human hearing is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So 20 times a second we can hear, that's the lowest sound, to 20,000 times. And with this vibration, 1 octave is double the frequency. So if that 440 is A here, if I go A 1 octave down, it's going to be 220. See, it's 220. And if I go down again, it's going to be 110. 110. So 1 octave is double the frequency. Hopefully that's not confusing. And then, so sound can be represented pretty much with these 4 different things: pitch, volume, duration, and timbre. Pitch is obviously different notes. Volume is how loud something is. Duration is like how a note or a sound occurs over time. So, you know, you could have that sound with a slow, short decay. That's the same sound. Or you could have it a long attack, which is this here. So that means it takes a longer time to start, as opposed to, you can go even further like this. Oh, computer's going slow. So that's another way sound can change, can be represented. And then lastly is timbre, which is like, I guess it's like the quality of the sound. It's like what makes every voice different, every guitar different, every sound different. So like even this sine wave, if I, you know, add another wave, oops, that changes the timbre. It's still the same note here, and then you can do other things like you could, the sound can change over time. So you could, oops, what's going on here? So sorry, my computer's going very slowly. But a sound can also, that sound can have like a filter on it, and it can open and close. Right, I'll try and make this sound good. Oh, that's why. So you can, timbre's just like, you know, it's the quality of the sound. But anyway, you don't really, this stuff is just like, you don't actually really need to know it, but at the fundamental level, that's what sound is, and that's what, you know, it helps you understand music production, I think. Or mixing anyway. And then music is typically represented in stereo, which means left and a right speaker. You can also get surround sound, which is lots of speakers, but people just mostly listen to stereo, or mono, which is just one speaker, which is the sum of the two speakers. So like often when you hear on your phone, it's mono, or like a UE boom speaker, it's mono. So it's got to sound good, both stereo and mono. And yeah, I will show you how stereo can, stereo always sounds better. It's like adds depth to a mix, and yeah. Everyone following? Cool. All right. So just some common terms. ADSR, which is what I was doing down here, where I was saying the duration of a sound. It applies to this, and it also applies to like effects and plugins, how they like act. So it's like attack, decay, sustain, release. It's like attack is how long it takes to go from, like for instance, this is the attack here. So when I do this note, it's taking a long time to go from 0 up to the attack level. So I could reduce the attack. Oh. And it's more of a pluck sound. And if I increase the attack, it's a soft, I don't know, onset of sound. Decay is the next one, which is like the time it takes to go from the top of the attack level to the sustain. So that could be when I have a pluck sound. If I go, sounds more like a pluck. If I increase it, it sounds more like a note. Sustain is when I hold the note down, what amplitude is that staying at? So if I hold this key down, it's staying, the sustain level is this volume here. Lastly, you got release. So with a release, if I have no release, as soon as I let go of the key, the sound stops. Whereas if I have a high release and I touch the key, take it off, it lasts longer, and I can make it last really long if I go like this. And then I'm not touching the keyboard now, and then it's still ringing out. So that's attack, decay, sustain, release. The next thing, which is a common term you'll see, which is threshold, and that is like the value at which something starts to act, such as like effects, and like if I have this guitar, and then I have like a compressor, not that you need to know what a compressor is at the moment, but like it will, compressor. Actually, I'm not going to use that compressor. I'll use a compressor that you can see working. A compressor just reduces the difference between the quiet and the sound, and the quiet and the loud noises. But if I have this playing, and it's not doing anything, and I bring the threshold down, and now it's acting. So an effect or something won't do anything until you bring the threshold down to the level of the music. If you imagine like this is the sound wave going, and then the threshold is here, and it won't work until you bring the threshold into the below the maximum amplitude of the sound. That sounds really confusing, but it's not that confusing. Next is, you often see HP and LP, high pass, low pass, which is essentially just letting noise through with an EQ. An EQ is just this, where you have the lowest frequencies you can hear, highest frequencies you can hear. A low pass just lets the low frequencies pass, which means like this. So you're going to take that guitar's playing. You're going to take all the high frequencies and reduce them. Oh, my computer's running so slow. There we go. Okay. So that's a low pass. And then a high pass would be opposite. So that's this. And it cuts out all the low frequencies. So that's what a low pass, high pass is. Another common term you see in music production is talking about analog and digital. We've kind of moved mostly to a digital domain, and like it's pretty crazy. Like my laptop, which is this big, can now be as powerful as like the best $1 million studio like 30, 40 years ago, which is pretty amazing. And you can still get all that. They have all these plugins are actually physical devices like compressors and EQs, and like if you want to buy them, they're like $5,000-$10,000. But you can buy a plugin for like $50, or yeah, you get free ones in your door. And but you have what's called analog emulation plugins and things like that. So that was this is an EQ, but you can also have an analog EQ, which would be something like EQ analog. Maybe this one. This is also an EQ. It's pretty much just a low, mid, high, and this is what you see on like a mixer. Like if you're playing live, it's the same thing. Like that's a low. If you reduce the lows, like that, all it's doing is like this. It's like reducing it. That's all it's doing. If you want to do the highs, it's doing this. But typically analog gear and plugins add a character to a sound. Like they can add saturation, which is like adding harmonics, and it adds fullness. So typically like analog is for emulation of hardware gear and character, and digital is more precise and surgical. Like you can't do this with a analog piece of gear, really, like super surgical. I'm just having one. That should be fun. Is everyone following? I guess so. All right. And then the last thing that you might see is like mixer bus or sends. You have these on mixers as well. Like Ableton and Logic and all these things are actually just a mixer. Like it's the same as a mixer when you're doing live sound. Like you have different channels and you have volumes on each channel, and then you also have these little buttons called sends, which you can send to a bus, which is literally like taking imagine if all the it's routing a number of audio tracks to putting it on a bus, which is like a bus, and then you can process that bus by itself. So you can like send, you might have vocals and guitar, and you send both of them to a reverb bus, and then that reverb bus then processes, like adds reverb to that signal, and then yeah. So things like Logic and stuff use that a lot. Ableton's less to do with buses, but this is a bus down here, so like I can go so this is playing, and then down here I can add a delay. This is delay, this is the delay bus, and that comes up here. So I can send this signal to the bus. So as I'm playing it, increase that. Adds a delay. Or reverb. that's a reverb here. But anyway, so that's what a bus is. All right, and then as we get into, this is what a, I guess we go to a DAW. So this is Ableton. Logic is the same, but Logic looks more like, I don't know, it has like these mixer tracks down here, but like on the main page. But essentially most DAWs are the same. They are all the same, and they more or less at the fundamental level. And you have either audio tracks or MIDI tracks. This is an audio track, and you can have record music sounds onto them. So like I could be like, hello, 1 2. Oh no, that's not gonna work. Hang on, I have to turn that off and turn it on again. Yeah, so I can go hello 1 2. That's recorded my voice. Hello 1 2. So that's one way to use the audio track. You can also drag samples on. So I could go and get like a hi-hat and go and just drag it on, or like and then I can, you know, just duplicate it if I want. That's it. So that's an audio track. A MIDI track is an instrument, and it's either a synthesizer or like a sampler. So, you know, it could be, this is a piano, or it could also be a drum kit, for example. I could get some drums like this, drag it onto here, this is a plugin, a drum plugin. It's an instrument plugin, and it's loading. But yeah, then I've got this, should play. And then I can, you know, make drum noises with this. And then I can make a MIDI beat. So like I can literally drag that in. Whoops. And then this is what the MIDI looks like. So this is a kick, that's the snare, that's the hi-hat, snare, kick. And then you also have piano or whatever instrument is, and I could record the MIDI, so I could just go, terrible piano skills, I'm trying to learn the piano, that was really bad. But it's recorded it like that, and you can move it around, I can move the notes around. Yeah, so that's MIDI. And then you have audio effects and MIDI effects. MIDI effects are not as commonly used, but like for instance, if I had that, I know I did some wrong notes. But I could get like MIDI effect could be an arpeggiator. So MIDI effect, arpeggiator, and then it's gonna like play this is the arpeggiator, it's gonna play the notes like do 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 do. That's what it's gonna do. So when I play it, it's like that, and then I could like make it go up 2 octaves, and I can make it faster like this. Oh god. Anyway, that's what a MIDI effect does. Audio effects is a rabbit hole, and that's what you got all here. When I first looked at this, when I was doing music production, I didn't really know other than like reverb, EQ, but yeah, you have stock plugins, stock effects, and you also have plugins from third-party manufacturers like here. These are all different manufacturers. And And yeah, I think I'll go into plugin effects next, I think. Yeah. So I found it very overwhelming to begin with all the effects and plugins that there is, but really they can be pretty much divided into these categories. So it could be EQ, which is literally shaping the sound from low and high. If I bring this, so that guitar, if I reset this. So yeah, I could bring up the highs and take out the lows. That's what it does. A filter, all a filter is a high pass or low pass filter, which is literally the sharp cut I was showing you earlier, where it goes like this. Come on, computer. Hang on, let me just reset that. Like this. Like that, that's the filter. Next, you have dynamics, which is affects the sound in its volume, and that's like, so you have compressors, which is like this, which is taking with a sound is going to be quiet and loud, and a compressor just squeezes it together. So compression can be difficult to understand early on, but it's just essentially something's compressed can be made louder, because you can actually compress the sound and then bring the whole volume of the whole sound up. So like this is without compression, and this is with compression. Whoop. Doesn't sound very good, but I wouldn't normally use this compressor. I think you need to decrease that. Normally you want compression to be quite light, but this is what it sounds without it. You can notice it much more with vocals and things like that, but I'll show that a bit later. But so the other thing is limiters. So you can have it's like extreme compression, de-essing. So you can reduce the S's in a vocal by compressing just the frequency band that the S is on. So if I go something like this, something, you can put a de-esser on there and it will essentially compress the S's. Something. Something. Hang on, maybe it's this way. Something. Yeah, so it's reducing the S's now. Something. But anyway, that's what a de-esser does. But expander is opposite of a compressor, and a gate is like you can cut out background noise by it. It reduces volume below a certain threshold to 0. So like, say I was talking in this mic and there was background noise of birds, which you can sort of hear. I could put a gate on that, and then you wouldn't be able to hear the birds when I stop speaking, because the gate would only let sound above a certain volume come through. So a gate you would often use, you could use it for like a vocal with background noise and things like that on it. Then you have plugins to do with stereo field, which is like panning, stereo imaging. So this same riff, you can pan it to the right. If you can't hear panning to the right, you need to go to your options and go to the audio settings and enable stereo. but that should be on the right. Now it's on the left. Then you have time-based effects like reverb, delay, chorus, flange, phase. This is what a lot of people have heard, like delays, like a delay. Reverb is like sounds like a cave or like something in a big space. Then you have harmonic effects, which is like saturation, distortion. Distortion is pretty much just like saturation, but extreme. So you could have, I'll just go saturation. Saturation just adds harmonics to a sound. So if I went back to this sound here, the pure sine wave, where are we? I have this, and then I put a saturator on it, which was saturation. Come on, computer. So without saturation, it's just the single note. And if I add saturation, drive, and there we go. It's added frequencies, so it's also louder. So I need to turn that down. Come on. Everything is delayed on my computer. It's very frustrating. There we go. Oh no, yep, no. All right. So now that same note, which is this, has got been saturated, so it's got frequencies added further up the spectrum. And you can do it like, especially on like bass sounds, like you won't hear if you're on like a phone. This is sub. Let me just increase that a little bit. Stop it clicking. And then if you add saturation, you can hear it on a phone, things like that, where it's like this. It's more dirty. But without saturation, pure sub, one frequency. With saturation, add frequencies. I mean, you can also, it also adds like if you use subtle saturation, like on this guitar, it'll just make it sound more full. So, come on. So without it, with it, that's too much, but I got this video over here. Something you have to be considerate. The reason I'm changing this output is that like this saturator adds volume because it's adding frequencies, and then things sound better when it's louder. So you have to be very careful with that. So you got to be sure that if you add like an effect, it doesn't necessarily sound better if the volume's going. If it's making it louder, it will sound better. So you have to match the volume. Someone's just asked, do you find digital saturation could be too much sometimes? Saturation is something that you need to use in very, very sparingly, little bits. And yes, digital saturation is probably not as good as analog, but like if you use like a good plugin, like this, for example, this is a cool plugin. Like this is what I got recently, but like you can saturate this gets complicated, but you can saturate the mids and the sides. But we'll see if I can make it sound better than before. Alright, let's see what it sounds like. That doesn't really, I think this is very saturated as well. So if I found like a guitar, maybe I could find guitar, like a recording. I've probably recorded some guitar somewhere. Oh, new riff project. This is oh. So I'm just putting this plugin on because this mic uses it records 2 channels, and this is an emulation mic, so don't worry about that. But this is, I'd probably have to put, so this is a guitar. This is James Abley playing. But it's very quiet, and there's a lot of dynamics in it, so you would add compression to it. This is an example when you would use compression. Why is this not working? There we go. Dynamics. So this is a compressor. I'm gonna adjust to start working. So yeah, anyway, so that's a compressor on a guitar, and then when I add this saturation, it should sound better. Might not. We'll see. It adds more fullness. It's the thing with production is like, a lot of people probably can't hear that, but like it's super, super subtle, and you do this 1,000 times, and then at the end, it makes it sound really, really good. This is something you got to tune your ear to these things where you get like, you hear these minor changes. If you do that over a lot of stages through the track, then it's gonna make a big difference. But you only learn that by just trial and error and just practicing and doing it a lot. So the next one would be volume. So tremolo, if people know what that is, that's just like a sound, like a guitar could be like I'm just gonna use sidechain, because sidechain is pretty similar to tremolo. So sidechain just dips the volume, and it can make something groove, because like you could have a kick. I can show you that in a second actually. But like, so if I was gonna do this really quick, that's what a tremolo is. And if you want a sidechain, sidechain's used a lot in electronic music, for example. So if I just grab some random MIDI chords, this is also cool about MIDI. You can just choose some random key like D minor. Come on, computer. And then find some chords like this, drag them in. I'm gonna put them on here. And then, what's that? Drum kit now. If I can. So this is a synthesizer. It's a digital synthesizer, and it can make all different sounds. So then I can just, there's a preset that I like called Simple Jam. No, Jam. Simple Jam. Sounds like this. And then you can just find some cool chords. Oh, that sounds terrible. I don't know if this is going to sound good, but I just chose 4 chords that I thought sounded nice. I don't like that one. These are just like, it's a MIDI chord pack. I just got it online. It's just chords that, because I'm lazy, that someone's already just recorded them and saved them. It's the same as me just going like this. Oh, that's kind of cool. But that's pretty out there. So this is all me to show you side chaining. That took a long time, but you could have like a kick playing like this. Sounds alright. I'm gonna take the high end of that kick because I think it sounds a bit shit. And you kind of just get used to, like, I know what I like, and that's like, that just sounds better to me than this. Sounds like a basketball. And then you can add a side chain, going back to the side chain, which is literally, it'll make it group. So this is, come on. And like, you can add side chain to like all these different elements in a whole track, and then it makes the whole thing groove. So this is without side chain, with side chain. That's all it's doing. So it's just like super simple. It's just dipping the volume every quarter beat, whatever it is. All right, so these are the effects, and then you also have utilities. So you could have things to do with pitch, like auto tune, or various analyzers and things that change the performance and distort, and I don't know, meters, and there's things that take out crackles, and vocoders and stuff, but it doesn't. I don't know. There's just a bunch of miscellaneous ones, but these are the main ones. The other thing to remember is the order of plugins matters. It actually took me, like, when I open old projects, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Because I what are some things? Okay, so this sidechain thing. So like, what if I go like, oh, that synth would sound great. I'm gonna put a reverb on it, like a really wet reverb. Wet means a lot of reverb, and like this. So this is 0 reverb. I'm going to put lots of reverb on it now. But the problem is, with that kick, it's lost the sidechain because the sidechain's before the reverb. So it's lost that groove. But if I put the sidechain after the reverb, it's working again. So you got to think, okay, this is making the sound, and then we have reverb, which is adding echo to the sound, and then after that we have the sidechain, which is dipping the volume. Another application could be, a more complicated application would be compression. So if you have like this guitar down here, there's not, even though I've done it, there's not a lot of bass in this recording. But if you have, it's a very common thing with guitars, is you have a lot of bass in the recording, and that bass can trigger the compressor earlier. So I'm trying to find I don't know, like that has some bass in it. And yeah, you should technically put an EQ before that compressor and take out the low end. Something like that. Anyway, did that make sense? Yeah, Dan just says the signal chain. He's probably better at teaching this than I am. Yeah, so pretty much just think about why you're doing something, I guess. Like, a good rule of thumb with like mixing and stuff is that you would put, I don't know, I always put like a high pass filter on everything except for the kick and the bass, more or less. You should also do that with your live vocals and guitars, because you can, if you get lots of sounds in the lower end, you get this muddiness, it builds up. You can afford to have built lots of sounds over the top of each other in the higher spectrum, the higher sounds, but lower sounds, if you have a bass playing, a kick playing, and then you have like the boom of a guitar, and then you have like, I don't know, boom of a voice, it just makes it sound really muddy. So you have to make sure that you do like a high pass on most things, which is like, except for kick and bass, which is like this. You can put that very first, and then you just take out the low end. Typically everything to around like 60 hertz, like that. Yeah. So if I get that, because with the next thing is mixing, which I can just talk about that next, I guess. Everyone following? So the next thing is mixing. So you got like creating sounds, but it's not really much use if it sounds like shit, because it could just, if you have a bunch of things happening at the same time, it just can sound very muddy, and that's why you get mixers. Or it's why, like, if you're playing live through your mixer, it can sound really bad unless you shape the sound so it fits in the sound spectrum or whatever it is. So the ways you can mix are from low to high. That's low sounds, high sounds. So you can have every instrument in a different space, like kick and bass at the bottom. Then you have like maybe guitar and like vocals, and then at the top you got like hi-hats and like, I don't know, breathiness of your voice. So that, for example, low to high. And the other thing is like, well, actually, I got a picture of an orchestra here, because that's the way I think of mixing. I'm like, you want to have like a stage in front of you or an orchestra in front of you, and there you have all the different instruments in their own space, and you can do that. So you typically have, you can do that with your stereo field, like left and right speaker, left speaker. So if I have that guitar again, like I can be like, what just happened? Okay. No. Okay. There's the guitar playing. I can move it to the right, to the left. Then I can also move it further away, which is a little bit more complicated, but you can do that. So at the moment it's pretty much in your face, like here, and I can make it go further away by like, I can take an EQ. So if you think about how sound, like if you're sitting in your house and there's a party going on, you can't hear the high frequencies. All you hear is the doof, doof, doof. That's because over the long distance, you lose the low energy frequencies, which is the high frequencies. So long distance means you hear more bass, less highs. So you could do that. That might sound like it's a bit further away. And another way to make something further away is by adding like a reverb, like an echo. So I could add an echo. This is just a plugin for reverb. So I can reduce. This is the tail, how long the reverb is. So this is without reverb. Increase it. So that sounds further away. This is another plugin order. I'm going to move that plugin after the reverb because I want it to be far away. So now it's very minor detail. You can't notice it really. But yeah, so then now I can make that guitar in the distance to the right. So that's mixing in comparison to, if I duplicate that. Come on, computer. So far away, to the right, and then up close in your face. So that's an example of mixing. So I've placed that guitar. This camera's tripping out, I don't know why. But anyway, I've placed this guitar to the right. Sorry? Yeah, and it's just reverb and EQ. That's all it is. So that's an example of mixing. So I put that guitar in the background over to the right. And then like that allows me to have like a vocal in your face at the front. Because the general rules with mixing is that you have the kick, snare, and the vocal in the middle, pretty much in your face, pretty dry. Dry means less effects, and then you have like the and bass, yeah. So kick, bass, snare, and vocal in the middle, and then you have everything else like on the outside, like pianos, guitars, drums, like percussion, hi-hats, and the higher you go, the more you can like pan. Typically everything low frequency you want to be in the middle in mono, because going back to like frequencies, you have like you're talking about this flickering video is tripping me out. Yeah, with you have low frequencies which are literally meters apart. So like you might have like, you know, a sound that's going like 100 times a second or 50 times a second, a bass frequency, which is something in your chest, you can hear it, and it will, you come out of, if you have a stereo, you have it coming out of one speaker, hit the wall, and then you have it coming out of the other speaker, hit the other wall, and then they'll cross together and then they'll cancel each other out. Because that's something to know actually about. I can maybe show you that. It's an interesting thing. So this thing's called phase cancellation, which is like, it's how noise cancelling headphones work. So if you have that wave, if it's a, imagine just a wave going like this, and then if you have a wave going opposite, it actually cancels out the sound. And you can do that with anything. Like if I grab like a kick, So I grab this kick. I'm going to duplicate that channel. So you got kick here, kick here, exactly the same. Together, if they're in phase, if you zoom it down, it's all just vibration. This is a vibration of a wave. Together, it's gonna actually double the amplitude. So if I play both now, it's twice as loud. And then, but if I invert the phase, which is literally all it's doing is instead of this going up, it goes down, and this is what a noise cancelling headphone does. So I can do that with a utility. There's a bunch of other, so go to utility. My computer's going so slow. Like this. I'm gonna invert the phase. I think that's what it does. Yeah. So now, and what I'm actually going to do is bounce this in place. So I'm going to right click, freeze this track, and all it's going to do is convert this track to audio. And then you actually see this go upside down. So now flatten it. There we go. So now that's going up, now that's going down. And now if I play these both together, exact silence. That's what phase cancellation is. Hang on, zoom out a bit. So if I play that, it's silence. But if I shift this tiny little bit, you're going to hear something. Oh, hang on. So you hear it now. Oh, come on, computer. So that's phase cancellation. It's playing now, but if I align them perfectly, out of phase, it's silence. So that's what you have to be careful with when mixing, and that's the difference between speakers and headphones as well, because you don't hear phase cancellation through headphones because your left and right speakers aren't actually interacting with each other. Whereas when you have speakers, you have physical waves crossing each other, so then you can hear like phase issues and stuff with speakers. So that's an advantage of having speakers. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Yeah, so that's pretty much, so that's mixing. And then we have what makes good production, and that the first thing would be the song. And I was saying earlier to Cleo that yeah, you can't good production can't make a bad song good, really, and you can't make a good mix from a bad production, and you can't make a good master from a bad mix. So they kind of first go to songs, then production, then mix, then master. And then what makes good production is sound choice, so instruments and samples. You can use cheap samples, which I don't know, are badly recorded. I like collect samples, like these are my drum samples. So I've got like kicks and stuff that I like. And I've got like all sorts of stuff like cowbells. Or I've got little loops and stuff. Like loop, percussions. These are just little sounds. And you can get all these sounds from something like Splice. Splice is like an online sample directory. You pay like $8 a month or something, and you get like 100 samples a month, and you can just literally go, I want a kick, and then it gives you 10,000 kicks. Or maybe you want like a jazz drums, and then you go to this. Oh, that was really, really loud. Hang on. Come on. So slow. Turn the volume down. And you can click loop, because I actually want it. Maybe I want some jazz loop. And then like this. So like that, for example, like that jazz loop, I could like, you know, you can just make a song that easily. So I'll get that loop that I had before, and then I can literally drag it in. This might sound terrible, might not. But I don't know, that's like super simple. You can just drag some jazz drums in, or you can get like, I don't know, a fill. Maybe you want like a cool drum fill like this. Before you hit the drop. So splice is something cool. And then you have so sound choice, then sound quality. Sound quality comes from like recording, and then sample quality and plugin quality. So I've talked about that before. Recording quality comes down to first the sound source. It all comes from the sound source. So if you're a bad singer, it's going to be bad. So first work on your singing, then get like, you know, a good microphone, good audio interface, and then good plugins. It's like if you record with your iPhone, it's going to sound worse than like a $10,000 mic, obviously. But yeah. Next, to make good production is movement. You want things to be like, to breathe, and you do that through something called automation and just general recordings. Like if you record, you have natural dynamics when you play and sing. Analog gear also has, the reason why it can sound better is because it has all these inaccuracies and little, not artifacts, but like you know, a synth can be slightly out of tune, or a compressor can be like, I don't know, it's a physical thing that it's not the same every time you do it. It's not a computer software that is exactly the same every time you push a button. And the other thing I was talking about was automation. Automation is like something changing over time. So you could do it like this. You could have that. You could get a low pass filter, and so if I go audio effect, auto filter, which is just it's just a high pass, low pass filter. So then I could go this, and then I click in Ableton, you click A for automation, and then you get a little pencil, or I can just draw it in like this. So now this is going to start low and open up the filter and let more frequencies in, but as opposed to just straight up. You know, it adds emotion. Like you could have like a chorus, and then it could go like, then it cuts out, and then you just got like this, you know, build up or something like that. So that's automation. You can do all sorts of things with automation. You often automate filters or reverb, delay. So automation is very important if you want productions to sound good. Then you have good production, groove, and humanization. The problem with music production, biggest problem is that it can sound like a robot, because it is a robot. So if you have like a kick and then you have a snare, so that's going to be kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. It's going to sound like a robot. Hang on. Yeah, that's right. But like, wait. So drums sound like a robot. So I mean, there's a bunch of things you can do. You can make things, change the velocity, the timing. You can make them all a bit late. Like I could grab them all like this. and then make them like late, a bit more human. And then I could add like a, just before it, I can add some reverse claps into like the fourth one. That can make it groove a little bit. And then, I don't know if this is going to sound good, but it might sound a bit better than before. And then you could add like something with groove or humanization, like something which is like swung. So you could find like a hi-hat that's got a swing to it, which is, swing just means it's offbeat. So that. So this might sound bad, might sound good, I don't know. Is it in time? Okay, that doesn't sound very good at all. That's got groove. So, you know, that's better than just the doonch, doonch. Sounds like a robot, because this, you know, this really adds some more swing. So that's an example of groove and humanization. Yeah. Then you have mixing and mastering at the end. Mixing is what I was explaining before, which is just like putting everything in its own space. And then mastering, everyone thinks mastering is super complicated, but it's actually quite easy. Like at a basic level, it's literally just making it loud and then balanced. It can get complicated, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I can show you what I do for mastering if you wanted. But yeah, I don't know. That's sort of it for, I think. Yeah, that's a summary. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can like message me on Facebook or Instagram. And yeah, I mean, right now I could try and I'm open to answer some questions if you have any questions, or I can also make. I could also try and make something, and you could see me trying to produce something. But yeah, cool. But otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, sick. Yeah, Logic's just the same. Like, it's literally the location of things. Like in Logic, you have plugins which are like vertically. Like these are the plugins that go along. Like that's the same as Logic. Logic actually has the plugins like this. So you have the plugins vertically in Logic, same as Studio One and Pro Tools. Yeah, so that's the difference. But yeah, maybe someone just asked. I would love a workshop on. Well, are we able to mute people again? Possibly. Oh, I think I'm muted. Cool. All right. Are we able to mute people? And then I reckon it's better. It's better if we ask everything through the chat box. It's just super confusing. Someone's on the phone. Shift Command A. Am I good? Cool. Yeah, so I can ask things through the chat box, otherwise it gets hectic. But someone's asked to do like how would you record guitar and vocals and keyboard? I mean that's super easy. Like you could just do I can also show you. I'll quickly show you a project that's like a project. What a full project looks like. I'm gonna turn off my video.